It is now time for the Port Podcast.
In 3, 2, 1, welcome back, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Port Podcast. We have a very special episode for you today. We've got Sandy Ross from the St. John Airport here, finally. And we're
finally.
We are
Wow.
so. It's been highly requested, and we are giving the people what they want. Okay, we want to know the exclusives on the airport and what is going on. So we've got Sandy in the studio.
Sandy Ross from St. John Airport.
My booking agent's been very, very busy with requests. So
Well, good. I'm glad that we were able to fit into your busy schedule.
Excellent.
very happy to be here.
Well, thank you for coming, because there, we cover a lot of topics through the last couple of years on the podcast, but economic growth and vibrancy for Greater St. John is always at the forefront of what we do at the port and the guests that come on the podcast. And time again, the airport is such a strategic asset for our region, and one that we're all really trying to rally behind with you. So we're really excited that you're on, and we'll be able to provide our guests with some insight as to what you're working on and what are the things collaboratively we can all be working on together as a community to make sure that our airport's thriving.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to chat about whatever you want to talk about.
Excellent. Well, let's dive in, Kate. You start.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of this for us is we want to understand a little bit about how the St. John Airport and, the relationship with the port, the business community, and the new services at the airport. What does that all look like?
Sure. Well, let me start first, kind of work in reverse order. Let's talk about the new services at the airport. So we've just recently announced, obviously, PASCAN is going to be starting service out of St. John to Halifax and Bathurst on September 9th of this year. And they're going to be offering 2 rotations a day to Halifax and 1 rotation a day to Bathurst. Now, there is room in the schedule that can be expanded. So that could be 3 rotations a day to Halifax and 2 to Bathurst. But we want to see what demand is. Now, typically, pre-COVID, we would have about 40,000 seats a year that would fly between Halifax and St. John.
Right.
Bathurst, a little bit of a new creation for us. We don't have good numbers on that from before, but normally we see about 40,000. So PASCAN right now is committed to about 15,000 seats. So we're pretty confident there's going to be a lot more demand than there is supply to start out. So we think that's going to be successful, kicking it off, getting people into the service, and getting people booked. That gets us back to our 3 big markets of Halifax, Toronto, and Montreal. And then we want to be able to grow from there. But getting Halifax was really the next big thing. And connecting Halifax and ending Halifax's long isolation from the booming metropolis of St. John.
Yes.
It's critical. But getting the business communities between St. John and Halifax reconnected. Craig, you know how much business there is that goes on between these 2 cities. So we've been hearing it from the legal community, accountants, bankers, pretty much everybody, that this had to get restarted. So we're very happy to have PASCAN entering back into that market for us.
And it's just yet another airport that provides folks with connectivity too.
That's
because, a lot of, we get to the Toronto and Montreal hub, as you know, but sometimes Halifax offers some very interesting flights if you're going further abroad too.
Well, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of an exclusive here.
Oh, we love this.
We've got a port exclusive.
You have sound effects.
We have sound effects.
That's very impressive. So we're in the process now working with PASCAN and Air Canada that there'll be an interline agreement, and I'll have to explain what that is, between PASCAN and Air Canada. So that means if you fly from St. John to Halifax and you've booked through a travel agent, so anybody local or American Express, you're able to book 1 ticket out on any Air Canada flight departing Halifax. So that includes London Heathrow, Boston, St. John's, Deer Lake, Gander, all the hot spots. But that means that someone traveling you don't need 2 tickets. You're going to be able to get out on 1 ticket. And for places like, we've got a lot of demand, obviously, for Boston. We're going to try and get it a little earlier the day so we can also get to Newark. But if you want to get to London Heathrow, and there's a lot of people in this market who are looking to get to London, you can get there 12 hours earlier from St. John through Halifax to London than if you did it from St. John back to Toronto.
Right.
And then on to New York, on to London from there.
Well, that's fantastic news.
That's some math the business
really
community
good.
likes.
Yeah, we're very pleased about that. So as people start to think about their travel plans for the fall, and anyone listening to this, Now, it's an interline, so that means it's an informal working relationship between the two airlines. Maybe they'll formalize it and go to code share, but that's somewhere a little bit further down the road. They want to make sure the service works. But if you go through your travel agent or you go through Expedia, you'll be able to see those tickets and be able to book out on one ticket out of Halifax.
Wow, that's very good. So, we talked about some of the new services and the growth. Walk us through what it's been like to navigate being at an airport, pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, really looking at so much change in terms of the amount of business travel that's occurred, the boom in personal travel, the advent of Microsoft Teams, and becoming a huge part of the business world.
Yeah. Look, it's been tremendous. COVID was obviously tremendously impactful for a lot of businesses, but for the airline industry, we all found out we can do almost all the business that we used to do by traveling, all on Teams, all on video. So it's been slow for the business community to come back, but they are returning now, and I think that we're maybe back in an area where personal contact is a little bit more important than it had been for the last couple of years at least. But it was really only 2 years ago. It's hard to believe that the airport was still basically on a bare bones operation. We had one flight a day to Montreal, one flight a day to Toronto.
Right.
We were still coming out of COVID. People were still being asked to wear masks. It seems like a very long time ago, but it wasn't. So we've been shaking that off.
That's so true.
The airline industries themselves have been struggling to be able to get enough pilots. They've been dealing with some regulatory issues that have seen how much work they can get out of a pilot significantly reduced. So the airlines have been struggling to get back to regular service. And we've seen, obviously, Air Canada with some issues, WestJet in and out of the region. Right. So as we've been contending with all of that, it's been a bit of a struggle, but I got to say it's been fun. The airport's been a very interesting place to work over the last 2.5 years. Right. No complaints.
Well, I mean, it certainly would be an interesting because you're always trying to figure out how to evolve and really trying to strategically plan the next thing, the next working relationship to be able to service your customers. That's so important today.
Yep.
And when people are, when they're using their money to, whether it be travel, it could be medical, it could be business, it could be whatever. I think it's important that, we are thinking holistically about that experience and the flights and the things that we're bringing into the airport. So. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Look, and for us, one of the things we've been really trying to do is to create, I'll say, a bit of a suite of services that make sense to the St. John market. It's hard to believe that for little old St. John, we're actually in what is perhaps one of the most hyper-competitive airport markets in North America. We've got 7 airports with international connections within normal driving distance of what Air Canada and others would say their passengers will travel from. We've got Holton, Bangor, Fredericton, St. John, Moncton, Charlottetown, and Halifax. Right. And pretty much every airline in North America, with the exception, I think, of Alaskan, call at one of those airports. Wow. So everybody's in our neighborhood, and as people in St. John well know, people are willing to go to Bangor to be able to catch an Allegiant flight down to Orlando or to Tampa Bay. So that's kind of the market we're working in. So we've been really trying to fashion with, resuming a good relationship with Air Canada, locking in Flair for summer service so people can get up and see the Jays or be able to get south and get to Orlando in the winter. And now with PASCAN to really restart regional air service back to, again, the Halifax market, but also getting to northern New Brunswick, getting to Bathurst, really trying to fashion, I'll say, a solution that makes sense for the St. John traveling community. Don't regard ourselves as competing with Fredericton or Moncton. We try not to think about that. We're really just trying to put together an offering that makes sense for this market.
So, if you're looking out 5 to 10 years, obviously you're in a planning cycle that would be similar to us at a port to make infrastructure investments that are complicated, that require a lot of detailed engineering, require often government support, because the revenues at an airport and a port authority never cover the infrastructure that they entrust us with. That's part of the puzzle pieces that we have to put together. So it's very similar operation, both federally regulated. So if you're looking out 5 to 10 years, the planning that you're doing now, what would you ideally like to see the airport become in the next decade?
Part of the reality we're dealing with right now, if you think about the airport, and you've been through the airport, it's the best of sort of 1970s Soviet engineering, and architecture and ambiance. But But it was built to handle probably 250 to 300,000 passengers based on the assumption that you have a bunch of little aircraft arriving often. Well, Air Canada is now flying A319s and A321s, 150-seat aircraft into St. John. Flair is bringing in nothing but 737s, and everybody wants to be in the middle of the day. So we're now putting 600-700 people through in a 2-hour period in an airport that is not designed for that.
For that, yeah.
So I think as we work on this new market and we build regional connectivity, quite frankly, we really need to be looking in the next 5 to 10 years, a very major redevelopment of the airport. We need to be able to put through many more passengers on larger aircraft. We need to be looking at sky bridges or jet bridges between, the terminal building that mean that you're not out in the rain or the fog or the sleet. I don't know if you've
It's a charming element of St. John. You get out of the plane.
I don't know if you've noticed
the
that.
The wind hits you in the face, yeah.
That's bracing, really.
It is.
Like an Aquavelva commercial. Yeah. But the so we need to really build around that, and we're actually going to be chatting with our board this fall about what our plan is to make a significant reinvestment. And we are trying to look at that on as best as possible, sort of a self-financing basis. I think, Craig, you've been a lot better than we have been at sourcing federal funding. If you have any secrets, you could probably share them right here in this podcast.
Well, no, it would
another exclusive.
Another exclusive. We weren't for many years. So the hit. We've talked a lot about the guests, and when I started at the port 13 years ago, which when I say that out loud, it still doesn't really.
You started when you were 12.
Yeah. I wish.
How old are you?
I wish. Yeah. Old enough to have worked here for 13 years. Trust me. So we had really been locked out of a lot of government funding for many years. So 1999, we became a Canadian Port Authority, but we hadn't had a major investment in the Port of St. John since really the 1980s. Wow. And then the cycle from 1999, 2000 into 2012, 2013, as I was getting early days and working with Jim Quinn, our former CEO, now Senator Jim Quinn, we had no real meaningful government funding as well. And so what we tried to do kind of in the last decade is to really make sure folks in Ottawa and Fredericton understood the value proposition. Like what can the port be if we all collectively come together and make these strategic investments? And you don't guarantee, and we didn't guarantee anything. And we tried to be kind of in the middle of a build it and they will come and kind of the perfect business case, because there's no such thing. Yeah. Things are dynamic in this industry, much like I assume the airport would be as well. So we really just made sure all decision makers were understood what value we could create and what kind of jewel of an asset if we really put the time, the effort, the dollars. And then we went out and got the right partner. So for us, probably not dissimilar to kind of the airlines and, airlines making decisions to choose. We wouldn't be where we are without a terminal operator, without the shipping lines, without the rail lines coming in here. Those were all missing pieces to us a decade ago. And I think what you've done, you've got the right partners kind of building around you and the airport. So I actually would predict you won't have too much of a difficult time getting that government funding because you've demonstrated the partners want to be part of this.
And that's a big part of it. Now, one of the interesting things you raise is obviously the good work the port has done over the last number of years in terms of obviously tremendous expansion you guys have and the tremendous growth that's meant for the economy. Not that we want to get into it today, but something we want to be able to look at too is cargo, because I think there's a natural connection between the port and the airport.
No question.
We heard this at Port Days.
Yes, we did.
A lot.
Yep.
So there's a huge opportunity there. We are actually in discussions to be able to get into the cargo business we'll say with Air Canada, with some other carriers to kind of start the business in a meaningful way.
Yep.
But in terms of, I think, turning St. John, everybody looks at St. John and thinks, this could be, it's the quadfecta of road, air, sea, and rail.
Yep.
If you can make all of those things work, as well as I do, everything associated with supply chains in North America is being fundamentally rewritten for the next century.
No question.
It's a huge opportunity for St. John to tie into that and really yield some, I think, spectacular financial results.
Well, that's a really important point, because I'm of the firm belief that rail, especially as it relates to decarbonization and lowering our carbon footprint, rail is the future. Long haul trucking is very bad for the individuals that are doing the work. It's got social determinants of health, really kind of poor outcomes for people that have to haul cargo for long periods of time, and no one wants to do that work. No. Very costly to the environment when you have that many trucks on the road. If we can get more cargo domestic, it doesn't even have to be international intermodal that we deal in with the port. It can be domestic intermodal, and if you can play in that space with air cargo, that is when we go around the world with the port, that is our value proposition now, that we connect into 3 Class 1 railways. Yep. And there's no reason why, air cargo couldn't land here and get on to the short line MB Southern and connect into CP, CSX, and CN seamlessly.
100%. And the other opportunity, and, within the local market, a lot of people have heard us talking about our land development at the airport as being key. So one of the things that's most important about the airport for our long-term development is being able to turn that land into a revenue generating opportunity. So the whole airport only, we're such a provincially regulated not-for-profit. So the entire airport operates for about $7 million a year. So if we can lease all that land and we can get the revenue coming from it, we can have quite a bit of extra revenue that we can invest in cargo opportunities, lowering costs of operating, landing terminal fees, and hopefully eventually get rid of the passenger fee and make St. John a really inexpensive market for people to be able to fly out of. But, all that land is also an opportunity for, you've seen in places like Jacksonville, Florida, where you have like the Mercedes warehouse for all of North America. So, they ship everything in on a boat, engines, car parts, and then when they need to get it to a dealer in Seattle, they take it to the airport and they put it on an aircraft and it gets where it needs to go. Right. That sort of symbiotic relationship between the port and the airport would be something, we're very anxious to be able to exploit to the betterment, obviously, I think, the people of
course.
St. John.
Yep. Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you take that golden opportunity, right? And also be able to provide just a better quality of life, both from labor, travel, supply of goods. Again, really happy to live in St. John. When I see these plans and these relationships and strategic plans coming together and everybody's at the table talking together, I think that's why we're actually seeing things really happen here. And, Craig and I, we both went to the same high school, and I know we both looked down here a lot, and we went to the airport a little bit, but to see what's happening now 15 years later, it's quite wild, and it's refreshing. So I would love to see cargo happen at the airport. That would be very cool.
Wonderful.
Well, and lots of other things too, right? Obviously, we want to get more aggressive about passenger growth. We'd like to expand what PASCAN is doing. We'd like to convince Air Canada to do a little bit more business here. Yeah. And we're looking to expand Flair. And we're looking for other partners to be able to get to other places. But, now we're kind of locked where we've got Halifax in, we've got St. John, we've got Toronto, we've got Montreal, and we kind of want to start growing up from there. But the key right now is to make PASCAN work in the fall, sell a lot of tickets, make it successful, and then we'll start looking at other markets after that. In terms of where people wanted to go previously before that, Ottawa's next on the list domestically. We'd love to be able to figure out a way to be able to get into the U.S. somehow. Something, obviously, maybe we can chat further about at some point in the future. And other regional connections within Atlantic Canada. So we're thinking that there might be a way to be able to get PASCAN directly from PASCAN from Halifax to Sydney, open that up again.
Wow.
We're in conversations with the Sydney airport now.
They're great for golfers that want to get to Cabot Cliffs and Cabot Links.
I knew you were going to
I knew you were. I had to.
I knew it.
That personally, I have a vested interest in that. I had a vested interest in that opening up.
Golf.
But
golf is a good walk.
It brings the point though. World-class builds, when you think about it that way. The only way more people are going to want to be an additional terminal operator or to build a business here or to have a 5-star hotel is to have accessibility. And if you can't get here easily and you can't get out to other places, people will they'll just take it on their blinders, right? Yep. And I'll go somewhere else. And now having this waterfront redeveloped, having more accessibility, I think it's only going to hopefully push that seal of excellence for everybody else also in hospitality and around the community as well, so that when we're bringing new people, new business to the city as well, they're having a great experience, because we've definitely hit it on cruise, right? So I'd love to get that on the other aspects of community.
Well, look, and too, in terms of, if you don't have an airport, you don't really have a tourism industry. So
No.
things like the Memorial Cup could never have been held here if there hadn't been an airport.
Right.
So growing services means, growing tourism, growing business attraction. Craig, I had only been in this job a little while when, I had a chat with some of the guys from DP World, and they were like, when is air service coming back? Because they had to fly into Bangor to be able to come visit you.
Here.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's great that they were willing to do that at that time to be able to, facilitate what you guys were doing. But I mean, long term, that's not, you can't attract business to your community.
Right.
No. If you've got to, if you've got to get on a pack goat to get from, Bangor to here.
Right.
And in the winter, that just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
So we definitely need to be able to make sure those air corridors are there and open.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed, in the job I'm in today, travel is a big component of it, and I started traveling again very early in 2022.
Yep.
And I noticed one of the biggest obstacles, not just for St. John, but for any airport in Canada, was the issues at Pearson. And I think a lot of people that may look at, I don't have the right connectivity in Atlantic Canada, and they were experiencing what we all experienced in 22 and 23. Didn't probably realize it was Pearson that was the bottleneck. Yeah. So how do you, as a key regional airport, work with? I'm always fascinated. How do you work with the folks at your colleagues in Toronto, because it's so key to your value proposition, is making sure Pearson and Montreal to a lesser extent can make sure they can handle feeding the regions.
So look, your heart goes out to the people who are managing Pearson Airport. They went through a hell of a time.
It was bad.
When you think about little things like training airside employees. So this is somebody who's just handling your baggage, delivering food to the aircraft. They all need to be vetted through security. They all need to be able to get security clearance. And if they don't have that security clearance, they need to be on a buddy up system literally every moment of the day. So when they lost a lot of employees through COVID, suddenly onboarding like literally thousands of employees all at one go. Yeah. It didn't go well. Oh, sweet Jesus. It was it was awful.
It was awful.
And that was replicated to a certain extent in Montreal, slightly lesser, but certainly very, very pronounced in Toronto. The best we could do for the most part was support them and try and talk to the traveling public about, pack a lot of patience when you go. And Pearson and Air Canada, I was chatting with the guys from Air Canada, and you're talking to some of the people on their executive team, and they're down handling baggage that afternoon because they've just got to pitch in. So they really did. I think step up, but they had such a huge hurdle to get over.
And it's much better now.
Yeah.
I haven't had an issue in ages of any material. Yeah.
I've been through Pearson and Montreal, Trudeau recently. Both were pretty seamless.
Yeah. It's
pretty
quite
much
good.
back.
Yeah. Just a fun. I have no idea whether this data is available to you or you track it, but I've always been curious when someone's leaving St. John and making a connection. What are some of those big destinations that people are ultimately, that's the final leg of their journey?
We do actually track that. So final journey, it depends on the time of the year.
Yep.
But a lot of the time people are headed out to Calgary, they're headed to Vancouver.
Okay.
Vancouver a little bit more than Calgary. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are headed to Ottawa, which is a secondary market right now.
Right.
But then you get your sun destinations. You get a lot of places in Florida and Orlando. Okay. And you get, interestingly enough, you get quite a few people going to Vegas.
Okay.
So, of all the places
I guess it's not surprising. When you say it out loud, when you get process it for a minute, those are all popular. And Vegas is a hub for conferences too. Yeah. You do get a lot of that. And
that's right. People are going for the conferences.
Well, we'll leave it at that for the show. This is a PG podcast. Yeah.
The conferences. Hey, I went to a conference in Vegas.
Did you?
Manufacturing.
There you go.
All about robotics.
There you go.
And automation, supply automation. It was one of the best things I've ever done. Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sandy. I have one final question for you, though. This is a fun one.
Uh-oh.
This is a fun one.
Is it about Vegas?
And it logistically doesn't have to be possible, but if it is, even better.
It's a logistics question.
Oh, no.
Not
Let's
even.
go to Craig.
If there could be one flight out of St. John anywhere, what would you want it to be?
Anywhere.
And it can be real crazy, or it can be common sense. But what flight would you want out of St. John?
Edinburgh.
Okay, that's cool.
That's surprising. Fair number of people from New Brunswick have sort of deep Celtic connections.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Edinburgh. It's one
Yeah.
of my favorite cities. So yeah, if I had to call, and we're never going to get it, but if I could get one, that would be, because everyone goes to London, everyone goes to Paris, but I'd go to Edinburgh.
You know, I've had 4 or 5 people in the last month tell me about wanting to go to Dublin and it being able to happen from St. John, getting a connecting flight and just doing a quick trip. I always thought the flight was longer, but it's actually shorter than Europe.
Yep.
So it's probably going to happen soon. So
Yep. Yeah, you can get out of Halifax on short notice to Dublin, get into Shannon, or you can get into Gatwick. So it's a great spot to go for the weekend. Yeah. Highly recommend it.
Well, thank you for everything you've shared.
Yeah,
I think
seriously, what a
everyone's
great
going to
chat.
really appreciate your vision, the plans. I think we're all here to support the airport. You know, we certainly do that as a port authority, is everything we can do, and really insightful. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you for having me, and always a pleasure.
And thank you all for listening and watching. And until next time, we hope you enjoyed this episode. See ya.
See ya.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening.